I am an African.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Africa for Dummies podcast. Today we are coming, unfortunately, during a period of war and conflict in the eastern part of Congo, where M23 rebels have attacked or taken over or about to take over the city of Goma and fighting the Congolese military. Unfortunately, during this conflict, people from different camps have died, and also many people have been displaced. To discuss this topic, as usual, we have Zenge here and myself. So, Zenge, welcome to the podcast.
Hello, everybody. Happy, not necessarily happy to be here this time, but yeah, as always, I'm here and Nathan is here, and we're going to be talking about something that's actually happening and unfolding right now.
So, I guess we can start with you because I'm sure you have much more in-depth knowledge as to what is going on in the eastern part of Congo.
Recently, I think people have already seen on news that there's a lot of talk about what's going on in the Eastern Democratic Republic of Congo, and one would think that there's actually war between Rwanda and Congo. Not quite, but maybe, but not really. So we're going to look at three aspects of this. We're going to look at the actors, the recent events, and the historical context. And Nathan, you can chime in whenever. But broadly speaking, Congo is this massive country the size of Western Europe, with a population of 102 million people. It's well known, obviously, that Congo has vast resources that are critical for everything from laptops to nuclear weapons. However, Congo's people are not the wealthiest people in the world, to say the least. Out of 180 countries from the Human Development Index, this is an index that measures levels of education, levels of wealth, individual wealth, and levels of health. It is out of 180 countries. It is out of 192 countries. It is number 180. So it is very, very low. So it's not very rich. It's quite poor in terms of the people themselves. But what's beneath their ground is enormous, which to a degree is why this conflict is also happening. We have actually done an episode on conflict minerals. So when we look at the actors, on one hand, we have the Democratic Republic of Congo, whose army is the FARDC, right?
Okay.
And then we have those who are alleged to be affiliated by Rwanda to be affiliated with the DRC, right? Rwanda alleges they're affiliated with the DRC, and the DRC army is the FLDR. So when we look at actors, there's multiple actors involved in this conflict that have been there historically, actually. So on one hand, you have the Democratic Republic of Congo and its army, FARDC, and you have those that are alleged to be affiliated with the Democratic Republic of Congo and its army, particularly by Rwanda, the FDLR. So FDLR is Forces Démocratiques de Libération du Rwanda, the Democratic Forces of the Liberation of Rwanda, right? These are people that Rwandan government alleges are former genocide perpetrators and are still trying to perpetrate genocide in Rwanda. For those that do not know, Rwanda had a genocide where 1 million people died in 1994, primarily Tutsis and people that were sympathetic to Tutsis. So these are people that moved now to Eastern Congo from Rwanda and regrouped, and through various generations and training, Rwanda alleges that they are trying to destabilize them, and it's an existential threat to Rwanda. So on the other hand, you have Rwanda itself and the Rwandan Defense Forces, Rwanda's army. And then you also have M23, also known as March 23. The reason it's called March 23 was because in 2012, there was an attempt for that army to integrate into the full Congolese army. Now, what's M23's big deal? Basically, they are a group of people who are fighting for the rights of Tutsi Congolese, right? So Eastern Congo has a minority Tutsi population. And these are sometimes known as the Banyamulenge. This is a general term from the Congolese perspective. And we'll talk about this in the historical context as to how they came about. But these are generally the most primary actors. In addition to that, you also have MONUSCO, which is a UN stabilization mission, which has been there for over 10 years and has over 10,000 troops. Although Congolese government has been trying to reduce those amounts of troops, but has extended sort of a narrowed down deployment in the Democratic Republic of Congo, has extended it for another 12 months. So basically 2025 is their extension. In addition to MONUSCO, you also have another troop deployment called SAMI DRC, which is the Southern African Regional Bloc, known as the Southern African Development Community, SADC. So SAMI DRC is basically Southern Africa's mission in the DRC. Congo is a member of multiple regional blocs in Africa because of its central location. Congo is a member of Southern African Bloc, of the Eastern African Bloc, or the Central African Bloc. But in this particular case, the Southern African Bloc has actually got active troops right there, primarily South African troops. So there's almost about 2,000 troops or so. So those are the general actors right now. There's smaller groups that are aligned to M23. There was one group called AFC. I think the acronym Alliance Fleuve Congo, which is the Alliance of the River of Congo, who are closely affiliated with the M23, which the DRC believes Rwanda is heavily backing. And it has been reported that Rwandan defense forces are already in Congolese territory. Yeah. So those are the main actors.
Okay. And as to why...
Right now, those are the main actors. Yeah.
Okay, so then why do you think this has sparked off, like, now? Like, what was the thing? Because it seemed to be very, well, for people that don't pay attention to geopolitics like myself, but what seemed to be the thing that sparked this, that brought this together?
So when we look at the recent events, right? When we look at the recent events, there's a number of things that have happened. So if we're just to go and mention the few things that have happened in the last few weeks, for example, or let's maybe start with the last few months. There was a ceasefire agreement that was agreed on in August. Many people will be asking, oh, what's being actually done in Congo? So when I mentioned SAMI DRC is part of the Southern Africa's attempt to fix that situation. And it's known as the Luanda process. Luanda is the capital city of Angola. Why is it Luanda? Because the AU decided that the president of Angola, João Lourenço, would be basically the host and the champion for solving the situation in Eastern Democratic Republic of Congo. Why Angola? Angola is part of the southern region, and it's also part of this organization called the Great Lakes region. There's a regional bloc called the Great Lakes region. So countries like Congo, Tanzania, Zambia, all the big lakes like Tanganyika, Lake Victoria, many of those countries are involved in it. So Luanda is basically the person they have trusted to deal with and mediate between the DRC and Rwanda. So they've had various meetings. They've had dozens of ceasefire attempts, and this is the August 2024 one is the latest one, and they were supposed to meet in December, but last minute Rwanda decided not to attend because some of Rwanda's conditions, Rwanda did not feel that Congo met the conditions to meet again. And the president of Rwanda, Paul Kagame, actually said in his annual press conference where he said, I'm not just going to, and I'm paraphrasing, I'm not just going to go there and sign pieces of paper and no one is committing to anything. And then, of course, Congo side says, Congo basically wants M23 eliminated, and they do not want to negotiate with M23, and they want Rwanda to stop backing M23. Right.
I believe correct me if I'm wrong, but one of those conditions were that Paul Kagame wanted Felix Tshisekedi, the president of Congo, to actually meet with M23 leaders and
to negotiate.
However, Felix Tshisekedi said that he would not negotiate with rebels. Basically, the same sort of this similar narrative that you see with maybe Western governments that say we don't negotiate with terrorists or something. Yeah.
Yeah. So from Congo's vantage point, this is a terrorist organization. So you do not negotiate with terrorists. And Sekedi ran on a strong platform that is going to eliminate M23. So Rwanda, on the other hand, wants Congo to negotiate with M23, and they also want to eliminate FDLR, which they believe is closely aligned with the army of Congo, right? So that piece. So just imagine being Angola, and it's just like, bruh, what's going on?
What do I do?
You guys are not
Yeah.
coming. Yeah. And
Yeah.
I feel really bad. I feel so sorry for Angola. They have really tried. They've gone above and beyond.
Yeah.
So now come next year, come 2025,
Right.
you have in the past week, so this is the week of sort of the 20th to the 26th of January
Right.
2025. These are events that have happened. So M23 starts making more advances in the North Kivu province. This is the province adjacent to Rwanda, right? And the Congolese government suffers a major loss with their. So Congo recently, about a year or two ago, the president of Congo decided to put North Kivu province under military control because it was a serious concern. So they had a military governor, right? And his name was Major General Peter Chirimwami. According to the UN Special Report, Rwanda strongly believes he's an affiliate or closely aligned with the FDLR, or cozy at least, to say the least, with FDLR. So he was killed. He was killed on Friday, in 25th January, by M23, who Congo believes is backed by Rwanda. And actually, UN experts also believe M23 is backed by Rwanda. So M23 started making several advances, taking over smaller towns closer to the major town of Goma, population of around 2 million people, and where many humanitarian headquarters and hubs are. And basically taking over the town of Sake and Minova. And finally, over the weekend, there were reports that from Sunday to Monday, there were reports that M23 entered the airport, entered Goma and seized the airport, which is critical infrastructure during conflicts. M23 is widely believed to have had a stronghold by now of the city of Goma, and or the government of Congo, still insists that it's in charge, although in practice most of Goma is under control of M23. The last time M23 seized Goma was in 2012. They had seized it for a week, and then a mission known as Forces International Brigade, and I'm trying to say this is the French acronym FIB, composed of South Africa and other international organizations, were able to kick them out. So this is the second time since 2012. The last time was in 2012 that M23 is taking over a major city of the DRC. So if you look at Goma, Goma is right next to a town called Gisenyi. I don't know if I pronounced it properly. Sorry to our Rwandan listeners. It's literally adjacent. There's literally an imaginary boundary between the two. It's almost, if you take off the boundary, it will look like one city. So on Rwanda side, there's Gisenyi. On the DRC side is the big town of Goma. So on Sunday, there was a UN Security Council emergency meeting. So the UN Security Council is a major decision-making body for the United Nations with 5 permanent members that, we all know. Well, and then on Tuesday, there was an AU Peace and Security Council meeting. So the AU Peace and Security Council is sort of the equivalent, but on an African level, of the UN Security Council. So the AUPSC, right? So both the UN Security Council and the AU Peace and Security Council met and had emergency meetings. So in both statements, you can see that there is a concern for humanitarian situations. In fact, in the last week, 300 to 400,000 people have been displaced in all of the moving and shaking. 15 peacekeepers. There's strong condemnation about the peacekeepers who have died. Remember, SAMI DRC is there, MONUSCO is there, thousands of troops, some soldiers, some police, some civilians. So when you have troop deployments, you have different types of people, right? Some are civilian experts, maybe dealing with mental health. Some are actual soldiers dealing with full-on bullets defending civilians. Some are police trying to just say law and order, if someone steals something, because literally there's an absence of proper governance in many of these situations. So 300 to 400 people have been displaced, and that's serious humanitarian concerns now. By the way, the troops, yes. So over 15 peacekeepers have been killed, of which 13
From South
South African.
Africa.
And South Africa is the main funder of SAMI DRC. I think over last I checked, mid last year, South Africa's government was pledging 140 million US dollars. And South Africa's opposition has been quite vocal in withdrawing troops, or at least are quite anxious about their status in the DRC.
Well, if I can chime in, from what
Sure.
I've been seeing in South Africa, well, I've been paying attention to sort of East African and Southern African news sources, and from what I see in South Africa, it seems to be mixed reviews. I think as the numbers started to climb, a lot of people are calling for more pressure. But from what I see is, well, so a lot of people are calling for the withdrawal of the troops because a lot of people are wondering as to how is this an immediate threat, or why is this South Africa's business in the first place, and calling for, like, I think the example that they're using is that, look, Zambia is has the longest border with the Democratic Republic of Congo, and it's not nearly doing as much as what South Africa is doing. So the question is why, and even Angola is also not doing the same. So why is South African troops there? Why are South African troops there? And then, but most people are calling for the withdrawal. I think that Julius Malema, who is the leader of an opposition party called the EFF, and he basically was reprimanding the government of the day, which is the ANC, basically telling them that they had sent them there without proper equipment, without, basically without any much enough equipment, and also basically stating that this is clear evidence that the South African national defense budget has been basically misused and also not been enough. Um, and because this has also made, I think, a lot of people in South Africa generally a bit concerned as to, hey, we're South Africa, right? We should be one of the, if not the most powerful military in Africa, one of the most powerful militaries in Africa. Why? How can this happen? How can this happen to a country like South Africa? And then on the flip side, what you have is people are feeling basically with the same feelings of how can this happen. It's like, uh, how can you let this happen without a response? Because there was a bit of time between the events happening or the deaths occurring, and then the president of South Africa basically giving a response, and then also the minister of defense. I think with the issue in with the South African forces, the defense minister Angie Motshega, I hope I've pronounced that correctly, but she gave a response, I believe, this afternoon, basically stating that what had occurred, because, as I said, as Zenge had mentioned, the Southern African Defense Forces, with South African Defense Forces, sorry, were mainly there for peacekeeping and law and order and that sort of a thing. And now what had happened was M23 had surrounded the city of Ngoma and found themselves in a very tough position,
Precarious.
precarious position, because they were not sent there to sort of fight a war. They were meant to have bring law and order. And so essentially what she had stated was that um, the soldiers had were killed during the fire between the Congolese military and then also the M23 forces, and that there were rumors of a white flag being raised as the South African forces are giving up. But she had stated that it was because the M23 rebels had sent word for basically they wanted to collect their dead as well, and so that sort
Mm-hmm.
of that white flag was there. However, we don't know how successful it has been. So there are a lot of calls for by a lot of people in South Africa to essentially call for a ceasefire and to so that
Mm-hmm.
they can bring back the injured and the dead, and also to withdraw
Yeah.
troops from the region. But other people are also saying, like, hey, um,
Mm-hmm.
this is serious, and it's
getting real.
I don't want to say that they're calling for an all-out war, but they're saying that they're calling for well, in their statements they're calling for Rwanda to be to sort of answer. And also we shouldn't forget, I think in social media I have seen a lot of people forget that also I believe some Malawian soldiers had also passed on.
Yes, yes.
um
Actually,
yeah,
there were soldiers from Burundi, Tanzania, Uruguay, and I believe Malawi. If I'm not
mhm.
if I'm, yeah, I don't know whether or not Malawians were there. Let me
Yeah,
just
but
double check. Yeah,
I read something about, I believe three Malawians also unfortunately passed on. And
yeah.
so I don't know if no, go ahead. Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, these meetings happened on the UN Security Council on Sunday, African Peace and Security Council on Tuesday, Tuesday being the 28th of January 2025.
So, which was yesterday, right?
Yes.
Okay.
And there is a meeting. Sorry, in fact, before I say this, let me just say there've been protests going on yesterday,
Right.
which is the 28th, which is the 28th of January. Protests, riots, and looting of embassies in Kinshasa by people that believe
Which is the
that
capital
are
of Congo.
supporting, yes, which by people, which is more than 1,600 kilometers to the west of Congo. So you see the disconnect between Goma and Congo, right? Goma's economy is inextricably linked to Eastern Africa, whereas Kinshasa is technically West Africa, Central West
Yeah.
Africa, you'd say. So it's so different. It's like just a thick jungle in between the two. So it's easier to go to Nairobi than go to Kinshasa from Goma.
From Goma. Yeah.
And Nairobi is East Africa. And so there's protests, but the protesters believe these countries are supporting or facilitating the chaos of M23 and Rwanda. So these countries' embassies have been looted and damaged or attacked and set ablaze. The United States, Belgium, US, Kenya, South Africa, and Rwanda, of course. So tomorrow, Thursday, the 28th of January, 2025, there will be a meeting called by the chair of the Eastern African Community. So Southern Africa, SADC, East Africa has EAC, East African Community. That's the regional bloc. There'll be a meeting, I presume, in Nairobi, which has been hosted by William Ruto, who is the chair of the Eastern African Community for the year, I think.
Thank you. Sorry, sorry to cut you off, but I was watching the press brief by the defense minister of South Africa. She had mentioned that there was, I don't know, correct me if I'm wrong, but a number of meetings have taken place. First of all, I think there was a committee of SADC leaders that had taken place, I believe, yesterday or sometime, but not the leaders of SADC, but some sort of a SADC security meeting that had taken place. I could be wrong. Correct me if I'm wrong. And then also, I believe that there was an East African meeting that had taken place, a virtual one, that was supposed to have the president of Congo and the president of Rwanda there. However, it's been stated that the president of Congo didn't show up. So now, apparently, from what I'm hearing, they're mainly looking at the meeting. I believe there's going to be a meeting with Angola, and that's where a lot of people are sort of having most of their hope.
I haven't
for it.
heard of the meeting with Angola yet.
Okay.
But I'm seeing that there'll be a meeting on Thursday, the 28th, tomorrow, for SADC leaders. It will be a heads of state and government meeting, which will be chaired by the president of Zimbabwe, who is the chair of SADC, the southern region. But the first meeting that I've heard of, which includes Kagame and Tshisekedi, and both have not said they have more or less are more or less going to be there, most likely in Nairobi, held by William Ruto in the East African Community. There's a lot of emergency meetings going on.
Yeah.
So I don't know about that meeting. I think there have been phone calls. Ramaphosa has called Kagame, has called Tshisekedi. William Ruto has called Kagame, has called Tshisekedi. but I don't know about in-person actual meetings. Kagame and Tshisekedi
Okay.
have not met yet.
Yeah. No, I'm seeing a few sources here that are saying that Felix Tshisekedi, President of the Democratic Republic of Congo, will not attend the crisis meeting hosted by Kenyan counterpart William Ruto
Oh
regarding
boy,
the
here we
security
go.
situation. And also, let me just keep looking, but you can keep going as I'm looking for more sources on this.
Yeah. So over this time, as I said, 300 to 400,000 people have been killed. Have been displaced. But humanitarian agencies, this is from the Guardian. UN and other agencies said on Tuesday that the humanitarian situation around Goma remains extremely worrying, and about 100 people have been killed so far in 3 days of heavy fighting in North Kivu. This is as of the 28th of January 2025, Tuesday. So all of this information is really just coming in. Even this is, Tshisekedi not going to attend is another sort of spanner in the works.
Yeah. I found
Yeah. So
another link. I forget the name of this paper, but it says AA. Basically, the president of Democratic Republic of Congo will skip an upcoming virtual summit. It's interesting because I think when I was listening to the defense minister, she had said that he actually already skipped it. Was it the defense minister? I think it was the South African Broadcasting Corporation. Basically stating that he skipped the virtual summit of the East African Community. A presidential spokesperson confirmed the cancellation to local media on Wednesday, stating that Felix Tshisekedi would not attend due to scheduling conflicts. The summit, convened by Kenyan President William Ruto in his role as the EAC chair, aims to discuss the worsening security situation in eastern Congo and the city of Goma, where the fighting between the Congolese army and M23 rebel group has intensified.
yeah, so this is I think this is an important segue to go into the historical context.
Okay.
Because when you look at the historical context, you will understand why perhaps Tshisekedi is not interested in an Eastern African solution, and who knows, maybe you attend the SADC one, right? And it also explains why there's so many mini summits going on. So historically, I don't know how far back you want me to go on, but I'll start with recent history, like the last 5 years. There was, as I said, in 2012, the M23 had taken over Goma for a week after, the refusal, the sort of difficulty in integrating M23, because their main cry was that Tutsi Congolese are being persecuted, and we want to be part of the army, the Congolese army. We want to be counted as equal Congolese as everyone else. And that had some difficulty over the years. And so they went to war, took over Goma. In response, an international brigade was launched, FIB, including a number of Southern African countries who were also involved. And they successfully repelled M23. M23 came back again in 2020, 2021 time. And the first response was the Eastern Africa Regional Force, right? The Eastern African Regional Force was primarily led by Uhuru Kenyatta. At that time, he was the former president. He became the former president. I think he was president at that time. But yeah, he has led it as president and as former president. Uhuru Kenyatta, former president of Kenya, was leading it. And they came up with the Nairobi process. The Nairobi process was the political solution, and the EACRF, Eastern African Community Regional Force, was deployed as the military solution to create sort of like a neutral ground to avoid, they were not meant to kill M23, but just to be a buffer to allow for the political process to succeed. The reason that it did not succeed and they were withdrawn within a few months of deployment was because Congo felt that the Eastern African force was too cozy with Rwanda. And another failure in the deployment was that there was a contingent of Rwandan troops. So imagine dealing with the problem, and then what you believe is the problem is one of the guys dealing with the problem. If you get what I mean.
Yeah, yeah.
Right? So Congo was like, yeah, I don't trust this deployment because Rwanda is in it. So if you're not going to check out Rwanda, then all of you get out. So they left. And Congo taking advantage of its central position and being part of the EAC and SADC, although Congo has been in SADC for a much longer time, it recently joined the EAC. It decided to look at SADC and for SADC to help it. Rwanda, if you look at Rwandan news, like the Rwandan News Times and Rwandan publications and just the Twitter sphere of Rwanda, there's serious hostility against the SADC forces, the SADC South African forces, because they feel like they're sheltering the DRC government, which they also feel is affiliated with the FDLR, the genocide perpetrators, from Rwanda's perspective. So that failed, and that's how Samim came in, and that's how we are where we are with the Southern African solution, Luanda process from Angola, the Sami DRC troop deployment, right? Now, when we go even further back, why are they Tutsi Congolese in the DRC? So there's this funny thing called the Scramble of Africa. Someone just drew a line, basically, and there was the Tutsi and Hutu, the kingdom involving the Tutsis and the Hutus, and there was literally a line drawn, and one side, which was the DRC, became Belgian Congo, private property of King Leopold, one of the most atrocious leaders to have ever left their marks on Africa. And then on the other side was German East Africa. So Rwanda, Burundi, and Tanzania were German East Africa. Now, those borders that they drew were imaginary, and the Tutsis were on both sides. Hutus were on both sides. But over the years, they became two different nationalities. And so for a very long time, those two Tutsi Congolese have always been there, but there has been reportedly an othering of them, in the same fashion that the Hutus in Rwanda had othered Tutsis that led to the genocide. Which really, Tutsis and Hutus speak the same language in Rwanda. So there's a strong argument that it's very much imaginary, that this strong distinction between Tutsis and Hutus. So that is the main cry. And successive Congolese governments have been accused of aiding and abetting the persecution and discrimination of Tutsi Congolese. Mobutu was accused of sheltering Hutus. So you have a situation where these people were highly discriminated, and the Hutu government that perpetrated the genocide was considered to be seeking shelter in the Democratic Republic of Congo when the president at that time was Mobutu Sese Seko. So Mobutu Sese Seko in 1997 fell and was replaced by a guy called Laurent Desire Kabila. And he was generally supported by Rwanda and Uganda. So Rwandan genocide happened in 1994. They felt that the Hutu perpetrators went and sought shelter in the DRC, and they went into the DRC not only to eliminate those perpetrators, but they went and replaced the president who was there. I mean, let's say not necessarily, they're not really the only cause of why Mobutu fell, but they exacerbated it and had a replacement for him, right? Which was Laurent Desire Kabila. Kabila was like, I don't really want to be a puppet, so he fired a lot of his Rwandan and I think Ugandan military advisors. And a few years later, he was assassinated, and his son became the president. So who assassinated him is still a mystery. How his son became president is a bit fuzzy, but eventually they had an election and legitimized it and so on. His name is Joseph Kabila, who was president from the early 2000s up until about 2018 and 2019. So Joseph Kabila then became president and was on sort of better terms with the Democratic Republic of Congo for quite some time. There were obviously tensions here and there, but they were on much better terms. So the downfall of Mobutu was considered the first Congo War. The second, the downfall of Laurent Kabila was considered the second Congo War. In the second Congo War, you saw a lot of support for, I think it was the first Congo War, but a bunch of African countries were involved: Zimbabwe, Angola, Uganda, and Rwanda, obviously. So yeah, it was a massive war, and millions of people have been displaced ever since. I think the figure is around 7 million people. It's one of the biggest humanitarian crises. The UN peacekeeping has spent the most money, I think, in Congo. So yeah, that's the gist of the historical context. And so that's generally the historical context, and that's how we got here. There's always been a serious concern by Rwanda after the genocide that genocide perpetrators would want to come back again, because, mind you, the government that won and defeated the genocide perpetrators in 1994 in Rwanda was at that time. Now it's quite mixed. Was predominantly Tutsi, right? So Tutsis who were camped in Uganda. People wonder, why is Uganda involved in this? Uganda, when Museveni, the president of Uganda now since 1986, when Museveni overthrew Obote, who was his predecessor, in 1986, Kagame and other Rwandan key military rebels at that time, or militants at that time, Fred Rugema, were supporting Museveni and actually became a part of the security apparatus in Uganda for a while. And then eventually they decided, why don't we also go to our country and start waging a war because the Hutu government at that time in Rwanda, so this is the 1980s, early 1990s, was slowly intensifying the persecution of Tutsis in Rwanda. And eventually the genocide happened and Rwanda went in. So if you're interested in the actual happenings of the Rwandan genocide, we did an interview with a wonderful filmmaker from Rwanda recently, and we did a documentary on it as well. So that's how Uganda is intimately involved, the relationship between Museveni and Kagame. Uganda recently was told by one of the international courts, I don't know if it's the International Criminal Court or the ICJ, to pay a certain degree of reparations, which they already started doing, to Congo for looting mineral resources. Uganda, just to make things more complex, Uganda also has a troop deployment, but this one is a bilateral one, right? Just between Uganda and DRC, not a regional one, called Operation Shuja in Ituri province, which is north of North Kivu, which is the province adjacent to Uganda. You could probably get a map out. And they are basically securing positions in which Ugandan mineral interests are, and securing highways, because that region, again, is very connected to the Eastern African part. And obviously there's various allegations of looting and extractive exploitation of Congo by Uganda and Rwanda. Obviously they deny this strongly. But yeah, actually, let me actually read this. This is now beyond the history aspect. There's a really interesting. I read the UN report a few days ago, and here's the UN expert report. Right, the latest one on the Eastern DRC was made in December 2024. So, quote: estimated volumes of traded minerals and Alliance Fleuve Congo movement du 23 Mars. Sorry, let me read that again. The estimated volumes of traded minerals between the AFC, which is an ally of M23, and M23 Profit. So in Rubaya, which is an area in Eastern Congo, witnesses to AFC and M23 mineral convoys reported that minerals were loaded twice weekly into convoys of 4 to 5 vehicles capable of transporting up to 5 tons per load. From mid-May to late October, the frequency and volumes of minerals leaving Rubaya were constant. AFC and M23 thus controlled the trade and transport of around 120 tons of coltan monthly. Coltan is a critical mineral for various technologies. And then it also says AFC and M23 levied taxes and in-kind payments on the sale and transportation of minerals. So it's basically like their own little fiefdom, right? For you to be able to tax people, you have to have some type of authority. The tax on kilogram of coltan and manganese was $7, while tax on cassiterite, another critical mineral, was $4 per kilogram. AFC and M23 thus collected at least, here's the big number, $800,000 monthly from the taxation of coltan production and trade in Rubaya. So conflict minerals is a central part of this as well. But obviously persecution of minorities and concerns about repeat genocides on Rwanda's and Rwanda side, as well as the Tutsi minority Congolese side. And then the DRC is concerned about infringement of the national territory and exploitation of minerals. So you see, everyone believes they are a victim at this point. This is why this conflict is so intractable.
True, and I think that's what makes the solution a bit more difficult. Of course, this has definitely made the situation in the region a little bit more worrying. I think I don't know if everyone heard about it, but the doomsday clock was moved to I believe now 89 seconds. I mean, of course, this is more nuclear, but definitely for Africa, it's a lot more makes the situation a lot more complex. I think.
Yeah, I mean, if I could just add, like, the doomsday clock, I always find it fascinating because when is doomsday?
Yeah, exactly.
And I think sometimes I think it's also very like Western centric. You know how people say we have enjoyed peace and stability for a very long time, and the Ukraine war is the first war where we have seen a threat to whose lives? The 1990s was the deadliest decade in Africa. Deadliest. That time, there was 2 Congo wars. There was a genocide. There was a civil war in Sierra Leone, civil war in Liberia. There was so many wars all over Africa at that time. So even when you say doomsday, some people have already had doomsday. There's people who have traveled last 20 years, completely always refugees, always facing one killing one another. So it's very important to think of when elephants fight, the grass is the one that, what's the saying? The proverb, African proverb. When elephant fights, the grass is the one that gets trampled on.
True.
When big people are fighting, we don't always see the ordinary people who have probably for decades had to move from this side to that side, this side to that side. So doomsday has already happened for quite a lot of people. No,
for sure. I mean, I definitely agree with that. I think I was sort of getting towards the trying to figure out what the solution was, because I think a lot of people, even I think within South Africa, have commented to say that Tshisekedi is also sort of. By the way, this is just my last comments. By the way, Tshisekedi is sort of playing a game where when he doesn't like what the East African community is doing, he goes to SADC, and then when he doesn't like what SADC is saying, he goes to the East African community. Although I do believe that SADC may have a better chance of sort of resolving the issue. Hopefully, South Africa can withdraw its troops. I believe the Minister of Defense said that they're on a hourly basis. They're getting feedback from the soldiers that are there. But yeah, it's really tough to watch and see the families who are losing their main sole providers, children, and that sort of a thing. It's really really tough to watch and see. But yeah, so hoping that the ceasefire is actually going to occur. What happens when South Africa withdraws its troops? We don't know what's going to happen. I think Southern Africa is largely concerned because there's a tendency of people, whenever this conflicts happen in that region, they tend to migrate south. And I think that South Africa is definitely concerned about that. There are some rumors. I don't know if I'm allowed to mention this. I've seen on social media of some what seems to be European mercenaries that are operating. I don't know.
Rwanda Defense Forces, I think, communicated. I don't know if it through a tweet or an X. I don't know what Elon Musk calls it now. Basically saying that a number of Romanian.
It was a bunch of, from what I saw, it seems to be different countries.
Let me read this. The Rwandan Defense Forces Twitter page. This afternoon is the 29th of January. So this is today, 29th of January 2025. This afternoon, the Rwanda Defense Force, RDF, received and escorted over 280 Romanian mercenaries who had been fighting alongside the armed forces of the Democratic Republic of Congo, FARDC, in eastern part of DRC. These mercenaries surrendered to M23 following the capture of the strategic city of Goma. They are now being transported to Kigali. Then there's a picture of them with buses and everything. So, yeah, the thing here is they sometimes when there's so many surgeons in the operating room, the patient might die because there's over 150 militant groups in Eastern DRC. And I'm being conservative, 150. Last time I counted, there's close to 200, right? So the issue of Congo sometimes is just too much. But it's also, as I said before, not a coincidence. There was a geological survey that was done that the mineral potential of Congo is 24 trillion US dollars. 24 trillion US dollars. Just let that sink in. The US's economy is not far from that. The biggest economy in the world. That's already bigger than China by far. 24 trillion dollars.
Yeah.
That is Congo's GDP. And it has the seventh, in the ranking, it's the seventh poorest country in the world in terms of the development of individual people. Yeah, the human security, what the experts call it. Yeah. So, all I have to say right now is, pray for Congo. Pray for the people, not only Congo, but even those Rwandans that might be affected. This is obviously something that will have some spillover effect of some kind, regardless of what side you're on. But primarily for the people of Congo and the people of Rwanda to sort these things out, because at the end of the day, these are African countries right next door to each other with potential that this world would have never seen. And conflict never brings development. As a Zambian who is on the southern border, that's what I hope for. Some sort of cooler heads to prevail. And really put a genuine, sustainable solution. And I sound super diplomatic saying this. Sustainable solution to the conflict.
Yeah, I think that's a good place to end it. So thank you guys for joining Africa for Dummies, and see you guys on the next episode.
I am an African.